Hi, I'm Ryan.
Hey, I'm Jess, and you're listening to Your Therapist Is Not Okay.
Welcome to part 2 of our special episode, a review of all the episodes so far with our producer, Denise.
So let's jump right in. In episode 6, our body dysmorphia episode, you talked about the constant barrage of messages about the ideal body and how that ideal keeps shifting. So I'm curious about something. How do you equip your clients with the right tools to be able to make changes in their day-to-day life that reflects the changes or the work rather that you're doing in therapy when you keep getting thrown back into a toxic environment? And I ask this because when I was listening to this episode, something came to mind where let's say you're in a situation where you have this toxic family member and you're not able to separate from that toxic family member because you're not in a space to financially, or you're just not yet ready to because of cultural or whatever other reasons.
Sure.
So it's like you're working on this in therapy, but the moment you step outside of therapy, you're stepping right back into this toxic environment. So it's kind of hard to see those changes on a day-to-day level based on whatever you're working on in therapy.
Over to you, Ryan. You take this.
Oh, that was the bus. Right under it. I am fine with that. This is, I think, a lot of what can make the work that we do cyclical or iterative, as you mentioned in part 1, where we're often going to be reworking different versions of similar issues many times over. And what we're really trying to, or at least in my practice, what I'm really trying to do with clients is help them gain an awareness of when they're falling back into a particular pattern, so that then they are able to have a list of kind of coping techniques that work for them, or kind of mindsets that are more nurturing for them, so that they can notice early in, like, oh, I'm starting to panic about how my jeans are fitting. Here are the things that have worked in the past with that, and I can jump right on them, instead of once it's completely overwhelming and hard to get out of. So yeah, I think recognizing things early and knowing what works for them to call upon for support. And I do often find that clients come back with having internalized something that we've talked about in session. Maybe even, it might sometimes be something that I said about a reframe. It might be something that they think that I said, because that happens, as we've talked about before. Or it might be something that they said, or maybe they saw it in media and brought it to a helpful perspective that they brought with them from maybe a influencer or something that has a body positivity kind of angle to work with.
So it's like having a toolbox that you give them to work with whenever they find themselves starting to struggle. So it's like right before you get to the deep end, well, not even before, but when you start to like walk into dangerous territory, then you're like, oh, yeah, let me run to my toolbox.
Recognizing those patterns, like awareness, a toolbox. Yeah. And then ultimately, too, a big part of that for me is, and this clicked for me when you mentioned toxic family members.
Yeah.
I try to shy away from thinking of people as being toxic.
Okay.
I think relationships and dynamics are toxic. So what I always encourage clients to do, and not in a victim blaming way, but let's think about what's drawing you back to this pattern too. The parts that you have control over. Because we can never change Aunt so-and-so.
Yeah.
We can only work with the client. The client can only take care of themselves.
Yeah.
Whether it's by preparing before they see them or choosing not to see them, whatever the choice that feels right for the client is, they still can only control their own actions, never Aunt so-and-so's. Yeah, anything you'd want to add to that? I know you work with this a lot.
I do work with it a lot, and it can be tricky. You summarized it really well. I was thinking that as you were talking, I was like, whoa, I don't know. I don't have anything extra to add to that. I think the aspect of acknowledgement that this is outside of us. A lot of times clients will come to me when it comes to these messages, thinking that they are just truths that are out there that they're failing at. Like, there is a very good body size to have and I don't have it. well, wait a minute, what is that message? What is that good body image? Instead of thinking of that as just a truth, how do we navigate it as a message that we've been bombarded with? It allows it to kind of externalize it instead of a failing. And so in that way, when we hear it again, we can kind of have a little bit more mastery over it, in the sense that it's not just us failing. It might be society failing us. I've also noticed with this particular one, even with all the work we're doing in therapy, and I think it's a part of that, it could be the most unforeseen situation that happens that allows someone to have growth. It could be that social media post.
Absolutely.
Or it could be being somewhere where you see a much bigger body, having fun and feeling sexy and realizing, oh, that is beautiful. Wait a minute. Why am I berating myself? It could be any of those things. So sometimes even with all the work we're doing, it might be something unforeseen. And I just know that I've seen it so many times that we can then work on what's happening out externally. And then doing little things like, what can my body do? Even if I'm not the size I want to be right now, I just accomplished a goal, let's say at the gym, that I haven't been able to be at before. Like those things can bring us pride. And once we start having pride with what our body can do, it's not uncommon for us to start to then feel proud in our body, a bit more confident, a bit more alive.
And you know, Jess, there's something you said to me earlier on this year, kind of related to this, but kind of not at the same time, where you introduced me to this concept actually of how sometimes we feel like anxiety, for example, it's like we're fighting against the feeling of anxiety because we're like, oh, it's so stressful, feeling anxious all the time for no reason, in quotes, or feeling this way for no reason, like my body's overreacting to something that doesn't actually exist. And then you reframed it for me by saying, okay, but what if that feeling is actually protecting you? Right? It serves a protective mechanism. So your body is actually trying to protect you. There's nothing wrong with your body. It's protecting you. It's working hard to protect you. And I was like, oh my gosh, that was a light bulb moment, because then you work with your body by not coming at it from a judgmental point of view of like trying to fix it because there's something wrong with me, for feeling anxious, for feeling like this, for feeling anxious because I'm not the size I want to be, or for feeling anxious because, oh my gosh, this role is showing here and people are going to see this and then judge me or whatever. But realizing that your body is just working over time, yes, but it's working to protect you, and then working with it from that place, as opposed to like working against it, because you use a lot of energy in doing that, like working against your own body. And I think this year I've really been discovering something about how our bodies are way smarter than we are. Like on the most basic level, like just keeping us alive, keeping us breathing, like fighting off even the smallest of infections. They're way smarter than us in a way which we don't always appreciate, because we just take it for granted. Like, okay, I can just do this, I can walk, I can... But it's like, no, on a day-to-day basis, on a minute-by-minute, second-by-second basis, our bodies are actually doing a lot to keep us warm, to make sure that all the blood goes to the right organs, the whatever is needed, where it goes, wherever. So then having that very basic, and that, I guess you can almost call it primal, appreciation for your body in that regard, and then realizing that it's working for you and not against you. So that's something that I've really learned a lot this year, and a lot of it is thanks to you. So thank you, Jess.
That's awesome, Denise.
You're welcome.
That was really well said too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I just really wanted to share that here, because that was something that came to mind when I was editing this episode. Now on to episode 7, which is a personal favorite of mine, specifically because of the vulnerability you both showed on this episode, and then the psychoeducation as well, because I am a geek when it comes to these things. So I really, really love this episode. And it's also a bit of a listener favorite. And I have a question on episode 7 for you, Jess. And episode 7, if you're not familiar with it, it is about body dysmorphia. It is a continuation on the body dysmorphia episode, where we were focusing on eating disorders, especially in this era where weight loss drugs are everywhere. So Jess, my question for you is in terms of depression.
Okay.
In that episode, you mentioned that sometimes people who struggle with food concerns, they feel the pressure to keep performing whatever thing they're struggling with,
yeah.
right? And I think oftentimes they're not like the loved ones who are there like looking and being like, oh, you ate, so you're good now. I think they're well-meaning, right? Because they're just worried because they're like, oh, okay, she said she's struggling with
this is okay,
yeah, so okay, sigh of relief. She's eating, she ate a bagel, so yeah, she's good. And I feel like that also can happen with depression, where it's like if you tell someone I'm depressed and then they see you laughing, 2 minutes later they're like, okay, so you're not depressed. You're good.
Right.
Like you're good because I saw you laughing. I heard you went to a concert. I heard that you did this. So my point here is like what I've realized in all of this is that it's very important for us to increase the education in mental health, not just awareness, but the education, because then we're able to equip ourselves and each other with the knowledge of, okay, this is what it is and this is how we can support each other. Because I feel like there's a big information gap between what a lot of these mental health issues and food-related struggles are about and then how we can support people through them.
Oh, sure.
And my question, I'm getting to...
Hey, no worries. You take your time. I'm liking the runway you got going on here.
It's a long runway, so bear with me. But my question here is, how do you, if at all, equip your clients who are particularly struggling to tell the people around them to show up for them in the ways that they need to be shown up for? Because it can be hard to communicate these things. We don't have the vocabulary. We're scared to make it another person's burden because then they'll be like, oh, you're good. You just ate. Oh, you're good. You went to school. You went to class. You were happy. So how do we tell our loved ones that, okay, I need you to show up for me in this way when we're already struggling to do the basic things on a day-to-day level of just getting out of bed and not feeling like they're hovering around us?
So this would kind of encompass depression, eating concerns, any of these kinds of things. I guess the biggest one is what outcome do you want?
Okay.
If we take last Wednesday, I started our meeting by saying, you guys, I'm having a bit of a fragile day. I'm not firing on all cylinders. I might be a bit snippy. I don't mean to be. It's just, I'm just noticing this where my head's at this week.
Yeah.
You and I likened it to the new moon cycle coming up because you were feeling the same way. Yeah. So that was a way to kind of give a heads up that maybe to treat me with a bit of grace because I might not get it right. It was a way to kind of say like, I may be presenting fine, but if I snap at you, it's not because you're doing something wrong. It's because I don't have all the bandwidth. Yeah. So that's a pretty personal example of what did I want from that. If I'm struggling with anything, I think is your question. It's what do I need from the other person and how can I bring them in? And sometimes what I need from them is not to ask questions. Right? Like sometimes I'll be like, I really want to share with what's going on. I don't want advice. And knowing that means you're kind of also allowing the other person to not get it wrong. Yeah. Right? You're helping both. And it starts from a place of really generosity to the other, that you're interpreting what you need so that you don't have to get mad at them or they're not dropping you. Yeah. I think that for me would be a very important thing, having that self-awareness. And if you do need something, being able to ask for that, right? I just need you to give me a cuddle at the end of this conversation, or I need you to ask me questions. I don't want to feel like I'm dropped. All of those kinds of things can help another person show up the way that we want them to. When it comes with eating distress, it could even just having that knowledge of saying like, from time to time, I'm really going to try to push myself. And I really don't want you to be monitoring my food intake. Yeah. I'm monitoring it enough, right? Like I'm seeing a therapist. What I need to do is let you see me fully and have me not hide, but I don't want to feel like I'm under the microscope. Yeah. Like that could be a bunch of other things. Like once we kind of know what we want from somebody. Yeah.
It actually reminds me of a specific time that I said to a friend, a friend made a comment about how much I was eating.
Oh, okay.
And I responded immediately, direct. I guess I was feeling spicy that day. But immediately I said, I'm going to ask you to never comment on what I'm eating again. That's it. never again.
Yeah.
And there was a little sting in the moment. I could see that landed in a way, but they took the feedback on and they understood that. And that really helped me too, because then I knew I had said it. I guess there's two things I could think that I would work with clients to do this. One is sometimes to rehearse if they would like to say like, do you want to practice how you want to say it? So, you have the words when you're in a difficult moment, because when we're stuck in that moment, it can be hard to find the words sometimes.
Oh,
That's true.
So having some key phrases that feel good to them and feel authentic to them to use would be really helpful. And the other thing I will do with clients about this is there's a boundary kind of question here.
Yeah.
And that's to work with. It's very actually similar to what I said about the last episode. I tell people that telling someone what you want them to do or not do is not a boundary.
Okay.
The boundary is your response to their behavior.
Okay.
This is how a lot of people end up feeling that they have boundaries and that they're always walked all over, is that all the control over whether or not their boundary is respected is in the other person's court. So instead to say, the whole thing being, if you bring up what I'm eating, I'm going to ask you to leave, or I'm going to leave. And then you have to do the thing you said you would do.
Yes.
Right? Or, or if you call me that again, I'm going to end the conversation. And then you end the conversation. So no one can violate your boundary because you're in full control of the boundary.
I love that.
Otherwise, I say to clients, this is just a hope.
Okay.
It's just a hope and kind of a setup to be disappointed, especially if it's a strong, historical dynamic in family or friendship.
I love that, because it really is about taking back autonomy in that way. Because sometimes we can feel very powerless in these situations. It's like,
absolutely.
I told them don't do this and they did it. Oh no. And then it's like, you can separate yourself by leaving, or if it's your house, telling them to leave or whatever. And I think that was very important for you to share. So thank you for sharing that, because I think I'm realizing as time goes on about how boundaries are an active thing, not a passive thing, that we just state and just leave it to float around in the air. It's like, no, you have to actually enforce them for them to mean anything, because otherwise it's like, what's the point?
Which does mean they're a lot of work. I don't want to minimize any, doing that is really, really hard. And those feelings of being disappointed when someone didn't come through with your request, that's real and that's painful.
I was gonna say that, like, when you set up that boundary at first, you're setting up a foundation. To link into what you're saying, it's about how you want to be loved. And so there can be yeses, like, please do this, please respond this way, is what I was saying. And it can be no, please don't comment on my body, or please don't do this. And giving them that foundation really sets another person up for success, but also means you have that foundation then to have the boundary. And sometimes that boundary is not in the moment. Sometimes we can't.
Yeah.
Right? Like, sometimes it's just, it happened and you walk away feeling anger and you wonder why, and you do the work, you go back to the person and be like, this happened again. And actually now I'm feeling away. You can also do that. So it can't, I think sometimes for anyone that's really struggling, it can be really hard to be struggling and have the capacity to also uphold boundaries. You don't always have that bandwidth.
Exactly. That's exactly why I asked you this, because it can be very hard to have, like, exactly what you're saying, have the bandwidth to do all of it. Because first of all, there is that disappointment that comes in with, okay, I told you not to do this, and then you did it, and then it's like, I didn't expect you to not show up for me in this way, and that hurts. So dealing with that, oh no, and then as well as having to, okay, what next? What am I going to do next? And even then, at some point, it may have to be like, okay, you have to end the relationship completely, and that comes with a lot of mourning, and then you have to really do some weighing of pros and cons, like, okay, is this something I'm worth? I'm not worth. Is this something I'm willing to let go of, or is this something that's like a hard boundary, like a no? This is what's that word when it's a
non-negotiable.
Non-negotiable. Thank you. It's a non-negotiable for me.
Non-negotiable.
For me. But I really appreciate that you said that. And one thing I also wanted to highlight in this episode was, Ryan, you said that mental health isn't fit within one box, like neatly. The same way with eating disorders, they don't fit neatly within one box. And I think that's something that we're starting to really understand. Like, okay, depression looks different on different people. Anxiety looks different on different people. Anorexia looks different on different people. And bulimia, it may not always present with the textbook cookie cutter sense. And doesn't mean that it's any less harmful or any less severe, in quotes, in one person than it is in another person, because it doesn't fit the exact textbook definition of, okay, this is the picture perfect, in quote, for lack of better word or phrase, person who's struggling with whatever disorder we're speaking about. So I really appreciate the fact that this episode helped me understand that, okay, this doesn't just apply to depression and anxiety, this applies to eating disorders as well. Because before that, I genuinely thought that, okay, anorexia looks one way. And I thought that bulimia looks the same way anorexia does. So now learning that, no, actually bulimia, there is no like net change in weight, because it often is accompanied by binge eating. And there's the binge purge cycles, and even then they look different and whatever. But this is me doing some free promo for episode 7, guys. I loved it. There was a lot to this. I think it's our longest episode. Yeah, I think it's like 47 minutes. One. It's a really, really good one. So if you've not watched it, please go back and watch it. It is a really good one. And I will also issue another trigger warning here. If you're not able to listen to those kinds of conversations, then that's absolutely fine as well. But if you can, please do give it a listen. It's worth it. All right, episode 8, the AI episode. This is a favorite of mine.
This one's my favorite episode.
Is it?
This one's my favorite.
I love that.
Yeah.
You were just hilarious on that episode.
I think so. I really loved
funny.
how angry you were at your friend. And it just felt kind of fun. And like that we took the question seriously. I think all of those things were kind of nice.
Yes. It was a very human response to AI at the end of the day. And they had some very valid like concerns about it. So I appreciated the way, Ryan, the way you presented in that episode. So we got some feedback where a listener mentioned that they were surprised that we did not mention concerns with data, in the sense that we don't know what these corporations that encourage the use rather of AI in therapy are doing with the data that they're getting from therapists and clients. So there's like huge data concerns with this, because every day when you open Google or whatever, wherever you get your news from rather, you see something about company X or Y or Z or whatever having been sued because their data got into so-and-so's hands and that's happening. So there are huge data concerns when it comes to this, especially when it comes to the therapeutic space where we're being so vulnerable, where therapists are being so, like, rather clients are being so vulnerable with therapists. So only God knows what would happen to us and what can happen to said clients if this data gets in the wrong hands. So I'm curious as to what you have to say about these data concerns that this listener brought up.
Legit.
Yeah, I mean, that does kind of fit within some of the questions and concerns I had around why do these corporations want us to use AI? It's going to make them money in some way, either fees for the use or marketing that's somehow in there or data mining like you're talking about. And in particular in a confidential space of therapy, are you now going to start getting targeted ads for OCD medication because you talked about that with your therapist? Or that's an interesting question. It is a concern I have. I don't have a lot of answers about it. I feel like really the burden of that is on the AI platforms, but maybe it being such a new field, there are some, not that many regulations or understandings of how to best regulate what's needed from AI or any new tech. The law and the regulations catch up after it starts being used.
Exactly.
It's an interesting one, and I've had a debate with so many people about this, but I just decided to go ahead and do it. I've turned off this is a bit of an aside, but it links in. Like, I've turned off the listening feature on my phone because I got very scared that I was listening to sessions. And the reason why I thought that is because I was having a session. Now, my phone was nowhere near me, but I could hear it answering a question that I had asked the client in therapy.
Oh, my goodness.
And that freaked me out of how much this technology is actually listening into my sessions. And I just immediately was like, I don't want my phone anywhere near my sessions because of the confidentiality and the mining. And so I think that when the person wrote that, it made me think about exactly what you're talking about, that like in our field, having you tell somebody something that is unmentionable to anyone else, or that you've never been able to bring yourself to speak to anyone else, having that then be something that's information that someone else can then buy or have as a consumer's product is terrifying.
Oh, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
But it did make me think about doing a part 2 on this. When we did the AI episode, you and I were actually delightfully and admittedly Luddites. I don't use AI technology, and I have no interest in necessarily going about that stream. I think it can have a lot of new potentialities that can be dangerous. That being said, I'm remiss to think I'm not using it all the time in other capacities, right? And so I think for that question, I thought, oh, we need a part 2. I always thought we were going to do a part 2 to AI, because I feel like for as long as we're doing this podcast, it's going to keep growing.
Yeah.
Right? And so I feel like I like that this was the start of the conversation. Because a lot of therapists are probably excited by a note-taking app or something. Right? And being able to kind of start to think about encryption and all that. Hi, Maggie.
Hey, Maggie.
Hey, Turkey.
Magatha Christie.
Magatha Christie, my dog. Yeah, so that was actually really important. I didn't feel any like kind of way of like that we should have done it. I was just like, that's an excellent addition to this. Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about it a lot, and yeah, it'd be really cool to even do like a retrospective in a year or something, because it's going to change a lot in a year. This stuff moves quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting that I remember you talking to me about the turning your listening on.
Oh, did I tell you that?
I've never had my listening on.
It's just,
ever.
it's automatic.
It creeps me out. Yeah, it's automatic. Every time my phone does an update.
Yeah.
Do you want to set up Siri?
Yeah.
I do not.
Because I was going to ask you if you have Siri set up, because it is Siri.
Absolutely not.
Isn't that a weird thing? I've never talked to another therapist about this, I guess, except for you. But I guess for any therapist listening, like, think about like what might be around that like would make the space like confidential or not confidential. Think about where are these note apps coming. Read the fine print, I guess, if we're signing up for these things.
Definitely.
Like being aware of that is really important. And I think one of the biggest things is don't choose convenience over like what? Ethics. Very good. Yeah.
Well
yeah.
said.
Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah. And it's interesting to hear you both say that you don't use AI, because I will admit I use ChatGPT for advice when I need something like cookie cutter. And let me explain. Not cookie cutter, but like straightforward.
Like if you're traveling to a destination.
My gosh. Of course you had to bring that up.
I'm just kidding. Please say what you were going to say.
Of course you had to bring that up. When it's like, I already know what to do, but I just need, like, let's say, for example, I need to send a message and I'm like, I honestly can't be bothered to use any emotional anything, because, like, it's a situation that irritates me. So I'm like, AI, do your thing. Here's the situation, write the message, and I'll send it. Like, I really, really don't want to deal with this because I've used so much energy on this already. So just do your thing. That's what I would say I have used it for. And I sometimes do use it for, because it's just very database, so it knows exactly what to say. And I'm like, honestly, if I was to send it, there'll be nothing nice in that message. So rather have AI step in and just be nice for me.
Are these messages to us?
Maybe.
I know.
I hope so.
When has ChatGPT responded to an email?
No.
It's when we were like, hey, could you change this little thing at 5 minutes and 30 seconds?
Denise is like, that seems like a very reasonable request. Thank you. Not only that, I would welcome that you maybe give a bit more of a considerate timeline. Sincerely, ChatGPT.
No, not with you. Not with you. It's like in my personal. They don't believe me.
I know we don't believe her.
I do, but I'm actually just having fun.
I know.
Razzing you.
Oh my gosh, no. Like, if I actually do care, like, and I'm like, okay, these are people I care about, like, when it comes to work, I'm like, I know. I don't want to, like, in quote, sully the space by, like, having AI type a response when it's like, I want to be the one because I actually care, even if it's a negative
Yeah.
response, in quote. Yeah.
I love what you're saying about that, because actually there's like a sacredness of certain friendships,
Yes, exactly.
projects, and that very much comes into the therapy room for me. Like, it's a sacred space. I don't want anyone else meddling, whether it's AI or my next door neighbor.
Exactly, because you did say that in the episode. You did say that that therapy space is very important to you and it's very sacred. I'm not using exact words, but you did mention how it's important to you. And I love that you're saying that now, because recently I found myself sending a birthday message that I will admit I used AI for, because it was like out of obligation. And I was like, okay, you know what? Because I have to do this, but I have no emotional ties here. AI, do your thing. And I sent it. So the person will probably never watch this, but yeah. My point is...
everyone you've ever said happy birthday to that's watching this.
No, you know what? My birthday messages are very special. My sister actually and my cousin recently told me, they were like, I look forward to your birthday messages every year. Out of everyone, I look forward to your birthday messages. So those who listen to this will know.
May 29th.
Okay, that's your birthday? Alright, okay. I'm putting a pin in that. To know for next year.
I'm just teasing, no pressure. As you were saying that, I was thinking, the pressure.
I know.
Oh no, it did put pressure, but I was like, you know what? I appreciate that, because I do put my heart and soul in this.
To hear that they're appreciated.
Yes. It was nice to know that they actually do see that I do pour my heart out in these messages. But like, my point in all of this is to say that relationships are messy and they're complicated. Like friendships or whatever, they're just messy. And it's like, sometimes that AI can just like be a shortcut to like not have to deal with some of the mess, some of the discomfort that comes with like, maybe this is not a friendship that I want anymore, but I feel obligated to stay in. Okay. Or this is like a roommate issue I don't want to deal with, so I'd rather just like have AI do it. And I can definitely see the disadvantages to that, but the convenience right now, I will say, it's definitely been like, you know what, I'd rather just have it like this. So yeah, this is not an ad for ChatGPT, please no. But I think, I'm just mentioning that it's...
I think what you were saying about... You got quite feisty when I made a joke about anyone that gets a birthday message. And I think that's exactly our point in the podcast. Was, of course you would. Because you put your heart and soul in. And to think that something else took it away actually made you kind of like, wait, I have to defend this. And I think that's exactly how I was feeling in this when people ask me, is that I don't want to be perfect. I think because when I get it correct, I want that to be because you know that it's because my heart's there.
Yes.
That I didn't have help. That I didn't have someone else in the background feeding me the information like an assistant at a party, so to speak, right? I want to genuinely remember the names of that are important in your life. I want to genuinely pay attention and link 3 months ago when this situation happened. And for me, it's not for everyone. It's just a very personal opinion that for me, that's important that I do that because of my memory and myself and putting myself there and my care.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that deeply personal relationship that's fostered as a result of all of this.
Yeah.
When you were speaking about the mess and the irritation and like all the complexities that come in relationship, I was thinking that actually links very well to some of my discomfort. And we kind of talked about this in the episode as well, of like, therapy is where we're messy. It's where we stay in the discomfort until we learn.
Yeah.
So if we have some sort of engine to take the discomfort out of it, are we still doing therapy?
Exactly.
Or are we just reassuring?
Exactly.
Which is not the same thing.
Are we still doing relationship in the case that I mentioned?
Exactly.
Like true, authentic relationship. Are we still showing up as ourselves? Like, I'm throwing myself under the bus here. But then, obviously, you're not really showing up as yourself because yourself being me, not showing up as myself because of avoiding the discomfort that comes with, like, having to, like, really reevaluate, like, okay, what's happening here? Is this a friendship or a relationship that you still want to continue with? For you to feel the need to even turn to AI? Like, you know...
But I like the idea of the shorthand, or the ease, rather. Yeah. Like, instead of agonizing over this, I also want to take care of me. That's what I heard you say. And I was like, oh, actually.
Yeah, because you also specify this usually when it's like not meaningful to you.
Yes. When it's not meaningful or something that is just irritating me, I'm like, honestly, I don't have a nice thing to say. So
I'd like to link this with the last episode that we talked about, actually. I was thinking when we're talking about communicating needs, communicating yes and no boundaries, that requires all this like authentic communication. And that's a tool that I use for relationships that I want to be authentic and strong. If I have relationships where this is like an acquaintance or a distant family member who I want to have just kind of a net positive and uncomplicated relationship with, then I'm not necessarily gonna have the hard conversation with them.
Exactly.
I'm not gonna use ChatGPT because that's harder for me than writing. So how do you even go to it, listeners?
Google it, Ryan. Google
right?
it.
I'm so with you right now. I've never felt more seen.
But that's where I would give the kind of polite, simple, happy birthday, I hope you have a great year. Kind of simple thing. Anyway, I keep linking with so many things, and I imagine you have other questions for us.
I was just thinking, like, we gotta get on to episode 9.
Wrap it up, Ryan.
This is definitely very much needed, because that episode, I was there like, okay, I use ChatGPT to write my messages sometimes, but okay. But now on to episode 9. I am excited to talk about this, the attraction episode. I think it is our most popular episode. Or second most popular.
We're out of time, aren't we?
Denise, you say that every episode is very popular.
And then it's your favorite.
Listen.
We get it.
You can't blame me. You can't blame me, okay? You can't blame me. And also because some of these episodes, because they're more recent, like I see them getting more listens than previous episodes. So I'm like, okay, this was definitely one of the more popular ones. And I'll definitely say that for the attraction episode. People love that. And you know, when this question first came up, because just you are the one who got the question sent into you, I was like nervous. I was like, okay, I don't know what's going on in other people's therapy rooms, but this never came like as a thought to me, because people are attracted to their therapist or vice versa. Like, what's happening? I was scared is what I'm trying to say.
What's happening?
Well, when we're the therapists.
I mean...
like, what is going on? Like, I'm definitely very scared. But no, I was definitely anxious about it. But then when we started planning for it, I was like, oh, okay, this makes sense. I see. Because I honestly did not, my mind never went there.
Okay.
So thank you to the listener who sent this in. Why did you decide to do this episode, to take this question and actually talk about this? Because honestly, if it was me, I would have pretended I never saw the question, because I would have been so scared to that extent.
It comes up, Denise. You might be very pure and perfect, but
very cutesy, very demure.
Very cutesy, very demure. It came up a lot when I was doing my training with students in Edinburgh. It came up a lot when I was doing my research, and it comes up even now about when we're doing trainings with our practicing students. One of the biggest fears is like, what if I'm attracted to my client? And so it just comes up. So when this came up again, I wasn't necessarily surprised. I didn't want to do it. I wasn't chomping at the bit. In fact, I was nervous. And then when we started doing it, it almost felt like there was a part of me that wanted to just keep it light. And I think you really encouraged us to go into the darkness with it, and that made it feel very authentic.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of it. It was this aspect of, what do we say that's actually important in this topic? How do we say something that's of substance? And also then how do we be real? And I was a bit nervous. As you know, in the podcast, I am very boring in my response to it. So I was like, how can I be cooler? But I had nothing.
I don't know if I've ever been bored by you.
Thank you. Or not. Yeah.
Yeah, it was, for me, there was part of that principle that I encourage trainees with as well when they're like, oh, this is really the client that I don't want to talk about. And I'm like, okay, it sounds like that's probably the client we need to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing where it's like, oof, this question seems like rough and unpleasant. Oh, that probably means it's important.
Yeah. Now, on to episode 10, the episode about how you navigate your relationships outside the therapy room differently from relationships with your clients. So my question on this episode is, how has being a therapist made you a better partner, a better family member, and just a better person in relationship outside overall? Because you did mention like how different you are outside than you are with your clients. But I'm just curious as to what therapy has done in terms of changing you personally, as in, oh, okay, now I know how to listen like this. Okay, you did mention being a better listener than the average person would be, or maybe like, oh, navigating conflict better, or whatever. How would you say it has changed you?
Well, I'm not better at navigating conflict. Anyone that knows me in my personal life is well aware. Conflict is a struggle point for me. But just as a joke to start with, but I think things that have changed. I'm more empathic probably than I was before. Much easier for me to consider what something might bring up for others in making a decision, especially if it's a person that's really important to me. I think to connect with like some of the previous episodes we talked about in this part 2 also. When someone makes that kind of request about like, could you just listen tonight? Or I'd really like to hear what you think about this. I think I'm much more able to just say like, oh, okay, to really be present with what that need is. And it kind of comes with that quality of discernment that I think we talked about with this episode, where I see that kind of like opportunity to push something deeper or not do so. So I think it can be a very intentional and authentic person to others. Not that I'm always successful, because I'm still not okay.
You're human.
I can relate.
Yeah.
What about you, Jess?
I think that I did do a lot, well, everyone did, a lot of unlearning when it came to listening. Because we usually listen thinking, what do I want to say next? Right? And if you're saying something, I'll be like, oh, I have something I can cut you off with. And like tell you something that relates to me. So that part is really kind of neat. I can listen and just let the story happen and really hear what they're saying before I even think about my next response. I mean, there's also a difference, right? Like if we're just kind of having fun, of course, like we can do that. But if someone's really bringing something important, it makes me a better listener. And that came from, my whole doctorate of like learning how to really appreciate someone having the floor. There's a term that I learned that I use all the time now. And the term's called congruence. And congruence is one of my favorite terms I've ever learned how to do well, because it's actually kind of hard. So I'll give you an example. If a client's saying something that they want to be fixed right away, for example, and as a therapist, you're feeling the pressure to want to be impressive. And you want to say the thing that's really impressive. So you're searching your head for the thing that's impressive and then you say it. That's not congruence. Congruence is saying, as you said that, I immediately noticed myself wanting to say the perfect thing that'll grab you and make you really respond. And I'm realizing that's because I think both you and I really want this to be something solved in your life. Let's talk about that pressure maybe both of us are feeling. That's congruence, where you just you show the inner working. And I can do that now with friends, where if you're bringing something, I might say, what would you really want from me right now? Because I'm noticing myself really wanting to
fix you or whatever.
Give you advice, Denise, about this, or maybe make this something that can be solved tonight. Or do you just want me to listen? Like I'll ask that before a friend or somebody might be talking to me. So it allows me to kind of really show up, or saying, Ryan and I had this the other day. You were sharing something really important, and I said, I'm noticing myself really trying to ask the right question to bring you to depth.
Okay.
But I'm realizing I don't actually have that question in my head. Can you just go to depth?
I love that. That's so raw.
Yeah.
Because there's no pretense.
Yeah, no
Yeah.
pretense. And so a lot of times, like, I think anybody in my life now kind of just doesn't have the pretense. I'm not trying to kind of be something I'm not or show that, or they can get kind of all of me. And I think that actually allows people to feel safe around me, like those in my life. And it allows them to kind of also take off the pressure to also kind of be perfect in relationship when I show that rawness. And clients taught me that a lot. Clients kind of taught me that they really trust me when the veneer kind of comes off, which means that in my real life, outside of that, I don't know why I said real life. I'm alive at every moment. In my life outside of that, I might find that just trickles through to like having more authentic relationships, and people can be messy with me because I'm not being super perfect put together. Yeah.
We are called upon so much in day-to-day interactions and in certain social spheres to be incongruent. To say, oh, it's so nice to see you. Oh, thank you. And, there are all kinds of little micro events where it's I don't actually feel that way. I'm just doing the pleasantry thing. And, in a mild example like that, that's probably not going to be very damaging to self. But there are other examples with important people in your life where always being incongruent is probably going to mean you're always being hurt, never getting your needs met.
You're not being your true self.
Maybe not even being true to yourself. So we can very much delude ourselves into thinking that this is the way it is and this is the way it's supposed to be, and I just have to be fine with it.
Yeah. So I'm curious, because in that episode you mentioned that you kind of turn off, in quotes, the therapy you to show up as just Jess or just Ryan. I'm curious as to whether your friends ever say, okay, as a therapist, Jess, what do you think? I want to hear your perspective. Or like, Ryan, like, I know you're not at work right now, but like, I want to get like a therapist. Like, do they ever ask you that? I'm curious. And what that looks like for you. How does that feel like for you? Do you ever get annoyed? Or it's like, ooh, okay, now I get to put on my nerd hat and, in quotes, school the people in my life and not just my clients. How does that feel? Does that ever happen?
I'm most likely to get that kind of question about other people.
Ooh. Okay.
So there's this person in my life, or so-and-so, I've noticed this, like, what does that mean? Okay. Do you know what their diagnosis is? Or, things like that. And I typically avoid engaging with that too much. Okay. I might just say something kind of pacifying, like, it looks like they're really struggling with that thing. And I don't know what that is for them, but you could talk to them if you wanted to. I don't get that a ton, if I'm being honest, because I don't think I'm always that approachable. Honestly.
I feel like you can be mean if you want to be.
I think that's the honest to God truth.
It is. I know. It's so honestly. No notes. Like, no notes. But it's just delightful that you said it.
I'm not like...
Oh my gosh. No, but you know what? That explains
I give that off a little bit.
That explains a lot with the conversation we were having the other day about the plane ride. Yeah. That explains it.
Okay, I have two thoughts that come to mind, but they probably don't answer your question super well. I don't think my friends trust me for advice unnecessarily.
Like, there's therapy, Jess?
Yeah, therapy, Jess. Which is such a weird thing to say. I think that's because they kind of want Jess to not be therapy, Jess, right? So they kind of do want me to be just myself or off the clock is what I say. I have this cheeky phrase if someone asks for something, like, I'm off the clock. Or if I say something really bad, like really like kind of like weird, they're like, Jess, I'm like, I'm off the clock. The other day Ryan was telling a story and I notoriously cannot do two things at once. So I was texting somebody and Ryan was telling a story and I got it wrong both times they told that story. So they said it once, I got it wrong. They said it again, I still wasn't paying attention.
You got it wrong in the exact same way.
Oh my gosh. Both times.
And they're like, Jess. And I was like, I'm off the clock.
I'm off the clock.
I'm off the clock. But I think dating advice.
Okay.
My neighbors might like to be like, Jess, what do I do here? How do I navigate let's say online dating platforms and like burnout?
Yeah.
That stuff. And the other thing I was gonna say is I get sometimes a cheeky delight when people are like all pontificating off something I'm an expert in. And so like when they'll talk about, let's say open relationships or polyamory or something, and they're all trying to like figure it out and like give good advice to each other, maybe we're at a party or something, I sometimes just am very quiet because I just want to see like what they come up with.
Where they go, you know?
And in my head, I will not lie that I kind of have this a little bit of a like, I'm like, why aren't you asking the person who's trained in this? But off you go. So I think in that way, therapy just is there in the sense you can't stop being educated or you can't stop being trained, but you really have to work hard at allowing yourself to. I know I'm making a joke about off the clock, but you actually do have to allow yourself that freedom to be off the clock. That if, And then I think sometimes if I'm at a party and I say I'm a therapist and they don't know me, I'm very boundaried. Because sometimes I get this phrase like, oh, you're a therapist. Thank goodness you're going to love this. I have like no relationship with my father. So I might just say, oh, off the clock. And also then set up a boundary, be like, I'm at a party right now. I'm not at work. And they'll be like, oh, can you be my therapist? I'm like, actually, no. Now that I've like met you in this context, like I have a great team I can set you up with. So that part I can also be a bit boundaried. Yeah. But I can notice that people who don't know me will often maybe I don't think they were trying to be bad, like manipulative or anything. I think it's just trying to bond with me or trying to like create something. Yeah.
Which makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. So for our last episode, why do therapists avoid giving advice? So how do you balance a client's need for direction with the goal of helping them develop their own insights? Because like you did mention that a lot of times you kind of like just lead them to, like you give them the tools to be able to think for themselves, to be able to arrive to conclusions or whatever decisions for themselves. But then there are times when it's like, okay, maybe I need to step in. How do you balance like, because I feel like sometimes it can be a bit of a tricky balancing act where it's like, okay, do I just tell them what to do or do I just, because I know in the episode, Jess, you mentioned relationships. When it comes to relationships, like being like, you tend to be more like, okay, maybe you should open up yourself more or whatever when you notice that they're repeating old maladaptive habits or patterns. So I'm just curious as to how you really balance the trickier sides of that.
I think I had used, was it the episode where I used clean our own side of the street?
You did, yes.
I think that can I lean on that? Because that feels like the best avenue in is I have a relationship with a client and we've been working through their stuff. The way I might kind of not give advice, but maybe lead is saying like, we've been working on this and it seems like it's coming up here. So we can go down the avenue of like, navigating this in terms of us working on like using this. Actually, I usually say using this as recon, like using this as like stuff to actually start to work on like what you and I have already been processing. So that feels kind of nice to be able to do it that way. And then sometimes if it comes down to sometimes I like with my clients will laugh at something they've done that might be that they know is like kind of maladaptive. And they're like, and then I said, shut up. And the conversation was over. And I'm like, oh, and was that healthy? And we'll have a good giggle. And like, what should you have done? Like, so that's obviously me putting my opinion out there. And it becomes kind of fun. And then we'll go into the depth of like, what happened for you to kind of like want to shut this off? What do we need to do to like allow conflict or allow this to kind of continue on? What do we need to say that we're not saying? What need did they actually hurt? So instead of snapping and having power, you actually can kind of tap into that need. So things like that I'll do as a way of kind of definitely guiding, I would say.
That's interesting. As you're saying that, I'm thinking that many times my advice within therapy is based on conclusions the client has already arrived at.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it might be like, okay, and I remember you saying that you wanted to foster this kind of relationship with your family member.
Okay.
And
so it's like a reference
do you
to something they
think
said.
that the way you handled that situation accomplished that?
Oh, cheeky.
That's big. Exactly.
Right, so it's not, I'm not saying you need to have a good relationship with so-and-so.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying, are you serving your own needs here?
Okay.
Exactly what you're saying. Like,
Yeah.
are we going in the direction of your needs?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You said you wanted to change this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to hold you accountable to that. I think there's a lot of accountability in therapy.
Yeah.
So it's like holding up that mirror to be
Yeah.
like, this is what you said. Is this actually matching up with what your goals are? What you said you want to be or achieve or whatever you want to fix in quotes.
Exactly.
Okay.
And psychoed can be, I think I mentioned this too, but psychoed's actually really helpful in that way.
Yes.
So for example, let's use the thing of snapping at your partner, cutting it
Yeah.
off and not wanting conflict. I might actually bring up power.
Okay.
And so I'll be like, let's talk about this in terms of this. Does this fit for you? Let's try this on. It's kind of that play we were talking about before. And of like, how do we actually feel after we've done that?
Mm-hmm.
And we'll talk about then it felt kind of actually powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, powerful can be very addicting.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we have power, we now no longer feel like we're in that lower position.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We now allow the other person to, so that we get to feel this.
Yeah.
But if we keep holding on to this, it can be quite corrosive
Mm-hmm.
because it can almost have a life of its own.
Yeah.
Or having an apology can also then allow us to feel powerful because now we get to feel like wronged and hard done by. And what are you going to do to make it right?
Yeah.
So all of those things with psychoed can kind of show that if we follow that trend, I do have an opinion about it, right? I use the word corrosive. Like that's clearly something that I would like us to work on.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things I often say in my office, and any client that might be listening would know, is if we shame it, we're going backwards.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and that's not shame. If I do something that might feel maladaptive or feel kind of, I did something that I don't want to do, shaming it's not going to help us. Let's use it. Let's think about it. Let's be with it. And even sometimes ask, why did I do that? That's so much more helpful than I shouldn't have done that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think it ties back to one of the body dysmorphia episodes. I think you actually mentioned it in both episodes about how you don't shame clients for wanting to turn to weight loss drugs as a means to lose weight because it's like because of what they offer, what they are marketed to be, which is a solution, like a quick fix for this issue that a lot of people have been struggling with for a long time.
Yeah.
So it's like attacking the person or making them feel like they're a bad person for wanting to choose this, in quote, easy way out doesn't achieve anything. In fact, it's actually going to regress the problem or like mean some sort of regression, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's like a big theme that I've also been learning over the past like year and a half. Like shame is not a sustainable tool for any meaningful change. It's not sustainable.
No.
Because yes, you may shame yourself into losing weight, but then it's like you pick up another bad habit, in quotes, bad habits, wherever that may be, to like balance that, oh, I'm so bad because I'm this size or I'm not that size or whatever, whether that means you're over-exercising to the point of hurting yourself or you have an eating disorder because of that or whatever. So I think really learning that shame is not a sustainable tool for any meaningful change has been really transformative for me personally, because it's also helped me like show up a bit. I feel like I'm lying as I'm saying this, a bit differently in my relationships. And I'm saying that because I'm outing myself here because I'm obviously not perfect at it. So if any of my friends and loved ones are watching this and they're like, she must be talking about someone else. Yes, I know. I'm not perfect. I'm not perfect. I'm not claiming to be, okay? I'm trying.
Yeah.
But yes, like showing up in that way in my relationships, or at least attempting to not be this person who's like, oh, why did you do this? Why did you do that? Because that's another thing you also mentioned in one of our last 2 episodes, where you said that when it comes to having a client who's like, Jess, I relapsed in this way. I took this drug that I said I was no longer going to take, or I did this thing. instead meeting them with, oh, so thank you for sharing that. What were you feeling before you decided to turn to this, as opposed to, oh no, I can't believe you did this. What's wrong with you? The way a lot of friends or people in their personal life, loved ones would feel.
Yeah.
I think it's just been helpful because I feel like I get why people react in that way, but at the same time realizing that it doesn't do anything.
No.
It just alienates, and even that
it grows
changes
the
my
problem.
relationship.
Shame
Exactly.
grows the problem.
Exactly. It grows the problem,
does.
and secrets and pain and just all sorts of bad things thrive in shame.
Yeah.
And that's, when I, share my cheeky or pointed questions that I might ask clients, that's in situations and in relationships where a laugh is going to help. I'm going to ask it in a more gentle way if someone's like really, grappling with something that's shameful or guilty to them. Then I'm going to approach that in a kind of different way.
We've rarely talked about our use of laughter. Either we should do it on another episode or just think about that. Like, because you and I use laughter as a therapeutic tool. And I don't often hear a lot of therapists talking about it, to be fair.
I think we've touched on it a couple of times, but I actually think that'd be a really fun, full episode.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Yeah. Maybe we can
Because
talk
we
about
both use
play.
it a lot.
Yeah.
Play and
therapy.
laughter.
Play and laughter in therapy.
Yeah. Stay tuned.
But you know what? That provides us with the perfect segue to end this episode.
Yeah.
Before we end, I just want to thank you both again for the hard work you're putting into this podcast. Our listeners love you, as you know. I love working with you. I love you both. You're just amazing at this. A lot of times I find myself getting emotional while listening to it, while editing, which is odd because I'm there for the recording and I'm like, but you didn't get emotional while they were recording. But yes, it's just because of how meaningful a lot of what you say is on the episode, even outside of the context of whatever we're talking about in that particular episode. So yes, I really do hope that we continue to grow, because I think this is something that a lot of people need to listen to and hear and learn from, to understand that yes, therapists are not perfect. We are all not okay.
Nice.
And it's really helping to broaden my perspective. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Denise.
Yeah.
Not only would we not sound as professional and crisp in terms of the recording as we do with you, we also literally would not have this podcast.
Absolutely. You said it perfectly. You made us do this. Remember when I said no when you asked me the first time around? I was like, absolutely not.
I was like, no, let me keep twisting her arm.
You're incredible. And for our very first video that we've ever done for our podcast, Denise not only came on the podcast, but allowed herself to be videoed. Yes. So you are brave and wonderful and represented something really cool here. Like, the questions that you have were so powerful. Like, as you were asking them, like, that's a very good question.
You kept saying, I didn't think you'd go this deep. And I think that we did, because they were really thought-provoking, engaging questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you both for engaging with me, because I wasn't sure how this was going to go. I knew it was going to go well, but I didn't expect it to go this well. So yeah, I'm going to leave it to you guys to wrap it up for season 1, if that's what we're calling it.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, wrap up time. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to Your Therapist Is Not Okay. We've enjoyed sharing this whole season with you.
Yeah.
And thank you for tuning into this really special last episode of the year, where we have our fabulous producer, Denise, joining us.
Yes.
Holidays can be a tricky time. If it's tricky for you, reach out to a therapist, reach out to Centered Self, which is in Ontario and can see clients, or any place that feels safe for you, that you can have somebody during this time. But we'll be seeing you back in the new year for season 2, and we need your help. We need your questions. Ask us anything you want. As you know, as Denise has noticed, we don't shy away from tricky questions. But no question is a bad question. If you have it, inevitably someone else has it, and we want to hear from you.
Yeah. And we will be back on the 8th of January. So stay tuned. Go back and listen to all our episodes that I referenced in this, which is every single one of the episodes we have recorded. Yeah, so go and binge listen. We will be back on January 8th. And yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Happy holidays. Happy New Year.
Bye. Bye.
Bye. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, check out our others. And stay tuned for even more episodes coming up.
Follow us and leave a review on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And please tell your friends.
You can also follow us on Instagram too, at Your Therapist Is Not Okay. Also, if you have any questions that you want us to answer, send us a DM there. We would love to answer your questions. And a lot of our topics come from listeners just like you.